Hello and welcome to Regent Hall worship for this Sunday. We're into October now and the weather is beginning to change. And on this Sunday we'll be looking at the situation and what does faith say to us for those of us in the UK, and I know also across the world. Times are very difficult. There are lots of challenges, economic, social, community-wise, personal, the pressures of work. All these pressures put on us an idea, and we wonder where faith sits in all of this. And so we're going to be looking at that at Regent Hall on Sunday, and we're going to be using two passages of Scripture. One is from Matthew chapter 14, the well-known passage where Jesus walks on water and invites Peter to walk with him. And in John 14, when the tragic nature of the disciples is, we've been with you, but you don't know who I am or where I'm going. After all this time and all I'm talking about, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, but you've not understood that. That must have been tragic for Jesus. But let me read to you the passage from Matthew chapter 14. Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. After he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was many furlongs distant from the land, beaten by the waves, distant from the land, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out for fear. But immediately he spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I, have no fear." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, bid me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "O man of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." We read that passage from Matthew chapter 14 that reminds us of possibilities of faith, but also reminds us of the actions of the limitations when what is around us invades into those things that expand us, when our mind becomes constricted because we become aware of the challenges more than the opportunities. For those of us who live in the UK, these are not easy or simple times. Economically, we're facing a winter where prices are going to be skyrocketing. Food is already much more expensive than it was previously. We have issues in our health service, with our medical stuff, issues with all kinds of aspects of society and how society functions, politically, how our government is going to function in the world. And we're not isolated from the rest of the world, so what we are affects others in the world, and what the rest of the world is coping with affects us. So how do we face those challenges as people of faith? Well, Matthew 14 gives us an interesting viewpoint. That sometimes God calls us into places that are beyond our understanding, into actions beyond our rationality. Yet sometimes we become constricted by the limits of the challenges that face us. I was walking home from Regent Hall the other night. I was walking across the park just near where we live, and it was a blustery day. The autumn leaves were out and they were blowing around, and as I was passing through, walking through, every gust then there was this group of blackbirds, crows, whatever they might have been, who sort of sailed the winds for a moment and then settled back down. And then the wind would gust again, and these birds would just lift up again, lift their wings and lift up and sort of float through the air and then come back down again when the gust had finished. And each time the gust came, then the leaves would be thrown across the grass. And I noticed that there was one gust and there was one bird that didn't move. Well, it was moving, but it wasn't flying. It didn't open up its wings, and it didn't lift with it all his mates. And it was because he had a leaf on his foot, and the leaf is very brittle, and the likelihood is, I wasn't close enough to see, but the claws had gone through the leaf, and now the leaf was stuck on the bottom of this bird's foot. And it didn't matter about what the rest were happening, what he could do. He didn't open up his wings to sail the breeze as it came along or anything else. For those moments that as I passed it, that bird totally concentrated, and his whole world was constricted to getting that leaf off his foot. It didn't matter that he could fly. His world was the leaf and his foot. It didn't matter where his friends were. His world was his leaf and his foot. And his world had become constricted. It hadn't taken away any of his abilities to fly. It hadn't taken away any of his abilities to be part of this group of birds, this flock, or whatever you call a group of crows. But for those moments, the world was no bigger than a leaf. In Matthew 14, we have the story of Peter and the disciples going over to the other side. They fed the 5,000, and Jesus said, "Go over to the other side." And he went up into the mountain to pray. And he came down, and the Sea of Galilee was windy, blustery. There was waves, and they hadn't got very far. These were not seagoing boats. These were inland fishing boats. And they hadn't got very far, close enough that Jesus could still see them. And these fishermen had been going at it for a bit to try and get as far as they had. So they were fully aware of the wind and the strength of the wind and the strength of the waves. And the currents and everything else that were part of this scenario that was holding them back. And Jesus walked on the water towards them. Now, I'm not going to use these moments to do any apologetic understanding of that, but I'd like to just look at Peter for a few moments, because Peter has a lesson to teach. Peter sees Jesus coming and he hears Jesus, and he says, Jesus, if you say, then I can come to you. And Jesus says, yes, you come to me. Come and be as I am. Do what I am doing. And Peter has the courage to step out of the boat. Now, remembering that the waves were still going and the wind was still blowing, everything was still happening that had limited this boat from crossing to the other side. But at this moment, and the only moment, because we have no record of Peter ever doing it again, but for this moment, Jesus says, come, and you can. And in listening, Peter steps out of the boat and he walks towards Jesus. Now, we don't know if it's 1 step, 10 steps, 20 steps. We really don't know. But sufficient that he was doing something beyond his understanding. And then Scripture tells us he became aware of the wind. And just in that small phrase, he became aware of the wind, his whole world constricted. And he became aware not of what he could be in Jesus, not what the power of God was doing beyond his understanding, or the call of Jesus to trust more and come closer. No, the wind constricted the world, just like the leaf constricted the world of that crow. It wasn't that he couldn't fly, this crow. It's that he wouldn't fly. His world was the shape of a leaf. And for Peter, his world became the wind and the waves and the limitations, his understanding. And he began to sink, and Jesus reached out and saved him and took him back to the boat. Now, we don't know how they got back to the boat. In holding on to Jesus, did Peter walk back to the boat, holding on to Jesus? Did Jesus carry him? We don't know. But what I'm saying is there are moments in the biggest of the challenges when God calls us to understand that there are things beyond our understanding. There's an old Salvation Army chorus that we sing sometimes. And part of the chorus says, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Now, it doesn't say they disappear. It doesn't say we become ignorant of all those things. But that the world in which we live becomes strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Something about him, something about being with him, something about feeling encompassed by him makes the world a bigger place, and the things of earth grow strangely dim. Strangely, because we don't know how or why, or because we're not ignorant. For Peter, the winds and the waves were still blowing. The very thing that limited the boat previously were the very things that were happening when he stepped out of the boat. But for a few moments, those things of earth grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. And he did what he never thought possible. Not just about the winds and the waves, but the walking on the water. To step out of the boat. Only when you become too aware of the world in which we live and we take our eyes off Jesus, then we begin to be pulled in by the limitations of the world in which we live, by the ideas of our own understanding, the restrictions of what we feel are the challenges. We stop feeling or understanding that there's something more, something bigger, something better. And we become constricted by the idea that I'm walking on water and the wind is blowing. What am I doing? In Hebrews chapter 12, we're told to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. It's on keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus that the world doesn't disappear. We're not becoming ignorant of the world. We're not becoming isolated from the world. But somehow the things of the world become strangely dim. We live by a different set of laws. We live by a different set of rules, different set of expectations, different set of morals, different set of ethics. How we treat people, how we hope for people, how we live our life, how we work for the world in which we live. They are different. And the world that would constrain us with its selfishness and its greed and its anger and its hatred and its pain becomes strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. We're also using a passage from John chapter 14. And it's the passage where the disciples say to Jesus, what's going to happen? And Jesus says, don't be anxious. And they said, well, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what about you? You know, what happens if you're not here? And Jesus, quite frustratingly, says, I've been with you for this long and you've never seen God. You've never felt the reality of God's presence and his power. If you have seen me, you have seen the Father. And yet you act and you live as if you've never seen the Father, never mind me. You've never grasped who I am. And I can feel the almost despair of Jesus as he says those words. I think there was possibly more despair there than there was when Peter started to sink. I remember when my children were little and they started to learn to walk. I didn't have a go at them when they fell and I lifted them up and said, maybe not yet. Have a go again. I believe that's how Jesus spoke to Peter. I don't think it was an accusing, oh, you man of little faith. I think it was there's still more. Maybe next time. Maybe another time, another thing, another lesson. But whatever it is, I think Jesus is saying to us, don't let the world make us smaller. If your world begins to look like a leaf, whilst you have the ability to sail the skies, what a tragedy. And yet I still picture the bird stuck in the floor, hopping around, while his friends were sailing the gusts of the wind. And he missed it all. I pray you will know what it is to sail the gusts and be free and find life in all its fullness. And that there may be challenges, but if we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, then the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. May God bless you.
Things change, plans fail. We look for love on a grander scale. Storms rise, hopes fade, and you place your bets on another day. When the going gets tough, when the ride's too rough, when you're just not sure enough, Jesus will still be there. His love will never change, sure as the stars. lose your foothold once again. When the going gets tough, when the ride's too rough, when you're just not sure enough, Jesus will still be there. His love will never change, sure as the steady rain. Jesus will still be there. When no one else is true, he'll still be loving you. When it looks like you've lost it all, and you haven't got a prayer, Jesus will still be there. Jesus will still be there. His love will never change, sure as the steady rain. Jesus will still be there. When no one else is true, he'll still be loving you. When it looks like you've lost it all, and you haven't got a prayer, Jesus will still be there. When it looks like you've lost it all, and you haven't got a prayer, Jesus will still be
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough.
Then you came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love.
Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid
To show you my weakness,
my failures and flaws, Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend.
'cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley.
There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can.
Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you.
Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. You're the